I love Sunday morning, in case you haven't been able to notice. I just love seeing you folks, and I love preparing for Sunday, and I love preaching, and I just love each one of you. And I love what God's doing here. It's just amazing to see Him working the way He's working. And I was thinking about that as we were singing. I was thinking all across the country, and indeed all across the globe, there are people gathering this morning for the purpose of worshiping God and opening up His Word and teaching His Word, and we're a part of that. And in God's sight, He sees us, and that's just an amazing thing. And so I'm just so honored to be here. I want to point out a couple of friends of mine. They're probably going to go, oh, shoot, we should have sat way in the back. So Angie, raise your hand. Denise, raise your hand. Dave, you raise your hand. So have you guys heard me talk about discipleship in the past? Have you ever mentioned that? Never. Once in a while? So these two are people who were serious about discipleship about 5 years ago. 5 now? 4 or 5? And have just been seeking God and seeking to serve the Lord. And so it's such a privilege for me to have you both here this morning. So thanks for taking the time to come. I hope we don't disappoint, but if we do, you take it up with the Lord. All right. Well, let's get started this morning. I want to point out that up front here on the table, I have a handout for you. I don't do this a lot, but I have the 6 prerequisite truths to preaching or teaching on the subject of church and state in the body on Sunday morning. Because of the lies we've learned for so long that there's this so-called separation of church and state, and that pastors ought not ever teach or preach anything that might be controversial or political. That's okay. Thank you. There's not much weight on it. So she's taking care of me. She doesn't want... She's taken care of me long enough, and she's like, I don't want to go through that again. It's more work for her than it is for me. So she's like, don't you dare lean on that arm. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm practicing, stretching it and moving it, and so it's getting looser. It's important for you to remember these, so I provide a handout because they're hard to remember after preaching. And I'd like you to be able to refer back to them if ever you start feeling that little sense of discomfort saying, or should we really be talking about this? That maybe you remind yourself of those truths that I outlined about why we need to be talking about this stuff and why we should be talking about this stuff. So I've finished that part, and we've spoken extensively on those prerequisites, and I want to move into the subject of current events, okay? And today is going to be a little bit of an introduction, but I hope we'll get into some meat on this subject this morning. So as we continue, just please keep those truths in mind so you don't take the bait of Satan and get offended, okay? And I've said this over and over. If you do get offended, or if something I say bothers you, or you think something I'm saying is opinion and doesn't come from the Bible, you have the right and my permission to come to me and say, explain this, and then I will, and then we can have a discussion about it, rather than feel that discomfort and then sit with it and have it bother you spiritually. My entire purpose in being a pastor is to facilitate the growth, the spiritual growth of individuals, to lead people to Christ and then to help them grow in Christ. And if God forbid, I should ever do anything that would cause you not to grow in Christ or to go backwards. So you have that open invitation always. So in that spirit, I provide you the handout. All right, so I'm going to start with my premise this morning. Are you ready? Here's my premise. It is impossible to separate faith from politics and politics from faith. It is impossible to separate faith from politics and politics from faith. It's impossible to separate church and state. And though you may try to remove politics in church or remove faith in the halls of government, try as you might, They are inextricably linked. You cannot remove one from the other. Why? Because our politics are driven by our beliefs, and our beliefs drive our politics. And so, politics is a loaded word. We're going to try and get away from that word a little bit. But I want to speak the words you're familiar with. So I want to just very quickly show you two examples of this in the scriptures to try and support this premise, okay? So, how did you see that? It wasn't even on the front page. All right, if you would do me a favor and open up 1 Samuel 15, 10 and 11, brother. I want to start with the example of Saul and David, okay? Each one, both Saul and David, were chosen of God to be the political head of a nation, Israel. That's politics. Both Saul and David sinned greatly as the leaders of Israel, didn't they? Both of them sinned. Saul was removed by God, whereas David was given an eternal kingdom. Interesting. What's the difference? Why? Why the two different outcomes? Saul turned his back on God and abused and corrupted the delegated power given to him by God, and thus his political power was removed. Let's look quickly at 1 Samuel. Look at what it says. The word of the Lord came to Samuel. I regret that I have made Saul king. That's God speaking. I regret that I have made Saul king. For he has what? Turned back from following me and has not performed my commandments. Meaning in his role as the leader, as the king of Israel, he turned back from God. In a word, Saul removed God from his politics. David was put in Saul's place as political head and was never removed by God. Why? Because David's heart as king was after God. The Bible says that he was a man after God's own heart. His heart was after God. In other words, David never took God out of his politics. Throughout his entire reign, he never took God out of his politics. And I think that's a powerful example. It's impossible to separate faith from politics and politics from faith. One more quick example, brother, if you would pull up John 19, 6 to 11. Listen to Jesus' interaction with Pilate, the governor of Judea. Again, another political leader, the governor. Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law we ought to die because he has made himself the Son of God." That's a religious approach. They're trying to use the powers of the government to fulfill a religious mandate they had. When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. I love that. Pilate had some sense to him. He entered his headquarters again and said to Jesus, listen to what he says to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer, so Pilate said to him, now imagine, he's in front of Pilate to be tried to see if he's going to live or die. And Pilate says, "Where are you from?" And he doesn't even answer. He doesn't say a word. That's remarkable. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me?" Pilate was astonished. "You're not going to speak to me?" And then he says this, "Do you not know that I have authority," that is the power, "to release you and the authority to crucify you?" That's political power. Jesus answered, listen to this, I love these words, "You'd have no power over me except it were given from above." Right? What's Jesus saying there? He's saying all power is given by God and delegated to you, and any power you have, you'd better use it in keeping with the purpose of God's delegated power. And if you don't, you have abused it, the power given to you. And in that abuse, you will answer one day. What is he saying here? He's saying, look, all the powers of government are given to them by God. And take a politician and put them in a role and have them deny the fact that they answer to a God, and you will have a tyrant. Mark it down. The only thing that keeps man, especially men and women in leadership who have power, the only thing that keeps them in check is the belief and understanding that someday they will answer to one even higher than they. Amazing, delegated power. I could go on and on with examples from the Pentateuch, the prophets, the wisdom literature of Proverbs, the poetry language of Psalms, the Gospels, the epistles, all the way to the apocalyptic literature of Revelation, to show you that all politics are formed and carried out upon spiritual foundations and God-ordained authority. Now listen, and that the battle between good and evil takes place primarily on this plane, that is, the governmental level. That is where the battles of good and evil rage. The primary plane upon which good and evil has its power and its sway is on the governmental level. Now, can you imagine, if that is true, a church or a pastor being afraid to even approach the subject of the power of good and evil in our elected officials, or those who lead us, or those who have taken power? The battle between good and evil takes place primarily on the governmental plane. It is where the power lies. It is impossible to separate faith from politics and politics from faith. All right, we've established the biblical truth that Satan wants to take the throne of God and to rule men. And I spent some time talking to you about the fact that one of his main strategies is to consolidate power among a few so that he can consolidate corruption. And that God has created the nations for the very purpose of holding evil in check, of keeping those that would be evil held accountable in this world for their evil by powerful nations who are seeking to do good. And we saw that began at the Tower of Babel, when man said, let's all come together and we'll be able to do anything we want and build a tower to heaven. And God said, I don't think it's good for all men to come together. And I posited the possibility that that is because when power is centralized, so is corruption. And we talked a lot about that. And I want to read to you, if you'll pull up Isaiah 14, brother, I want to read to you a text here that really reveals this, okay? I want you to listen to this now. Again, I'm establishing this fact that the powers of government are the very instruments through which God controls good and evil. Verse 3 in Isaiah 14, when the Lord had given you rest from your pain and turmoil in the hard service with which you were made to serve, you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. Now he's going to speak of Satan himself. How the oppressor has ceased, the insolent fury ceased. This is referring to the overcoming of darkness and evil. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of rulers. Look at that, of rulers. The staff of the wicked, rulers. And that struck the people in wrath with unceasing blows. You see this all across the world. The people being struck by those in power over them with unceasing blows. That ruled the nations in anger. You see the politics, the ruling of the nations? With unrelenting persecution all across the globe, unrelenting persecution. We're a little bit removed from it in America, but listen, we are being persecuted now too. So it's coming. Lord willing, it reverses. Verse 7, the whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing. Why? Because these things have been overcome. The cypresses rejoice at you, the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were laid low, no woodcutter comes up against us. Sheol, that is beneath, the hell, Hell beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come. It rouses the shades to greet you, all who were leaders on the earth. Wow, what a statement. Hell is rising up to greet you, all you wicked leaders of the earth. It raises from their thrones all who were kings of the nations. All of them will answer and say to you, you too have become as weak as we. You have become like us. It's the people saying to those who had them in oppression, saying, what, God has brought you low. Now you're as weak as us. What a remarkable thing. That's their fate. When they abuse the power of God, they will be brought low, eventually. Your pomp is brought down to Sheol, the sound of your harps. Maggots are laid as a bed beneath you, and worms are your covers. Now listen, verse 12. How are you fallen from heaven, O day star, son of the morning? That word day star is the word Lucifer in the Hebrew, speaking to Satan. How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of the dawn, or son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You see, Satan's purpose is to lay low the nations and to usher in a one-world government. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly over the church. In the far reaches of the north, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Those are the words of Satan. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. Those who see you will stare at you and ponder over you and ask this, is this the man who made the earth tremble? Who shook kingdoms? Who made the world like a desert and overthrew its cities? Who did not let his prisoners go home? All the kings of the nations lie in glory in each of his own tomb. But you, Satan, are cast out away from your grave like a loathed branch, clothed with the slain, those pierced by the sword who go down to the stones of the pit, like a dead body trampled underfoot. You will not be joined with them in burial because you have destroyed your land. You have slain your people. Satan, his purpose and his goal is to shut our mouths about the things of power, about those who have been elected or those who have been placed over us, to keep our mouths shut and to not speak about these things, especially in the church. And who gets more power when we stay silent? Is it Christ? Is it you and I? Why would our founding fathers put as our first right the right of free speech? Because words have power. Words have tremendous power. And we're seeing this oppression of leadership play out today in our own time and in our own country. And it continues globally in 2026. Go back as far as the Tower of Babel and progress forward to today, and the same things have been happening. Now, Jesus got victory on the cross. He won the war, but the battle still rages. So let me give you the context or the meta-narrative. The pattern I wish to show you going forward in the rest of this series is this. Listen to me, the one common thread that runs through most of the politics put in place in America by her leaders over the last 75 to 100 years and across the globe have been specifically designed, listen to me, to undermine America's sovereignty and to usher in a global government. That has been Satan's design from the Tower of Babel, and it has not ceased to be his design. And anything that stands in the way of that global governance needs to be destroyed and done away with. And everything I'm going to talk about in current events, you're going to see one common thread run through it. And it's going to be this. As I explain these things to you, you are going to see that they are specifically designed to erase national boundaries and nationalism and create what we call globalism. To destroy the sovereign nation that God ordained. Remember, I quoted from Acts chapter 17. I don't have it in my notes, where it says that God created the nations and the bounds thereof and the times of their habitation. That he created the nations for a particular purpose. And it has been man's purpose ever since to do away with the nations. And it's been Satan's purpose ever since to do away with the nations in direct opposition to God. I want to talk about the true nature of the Epstein files. I want to talk about the true nature of our elections and the true nature of America as an entity, whether she even be a nation or not. The true nature of our justice system, whether there is equal justice under the law, whether the law is used righteously or unrighteously, right here in our own backyards. In the central powers of our government, there are questions to be asked and revelations to be seen that reveal that these are the pillars that are being undermined and destroyed to usher in what the globalists want, which is the removal of national identity. Corruption of judges, dissolution of constitutional law. The true nature of those in power and how they get there. How do they get into power? And what happens when they do get there? Doesn't it seem like everyone we send to Washington is a really nice guy during the primary? Or gal? And then they get there, and the longer they're there, the more corrupt they become. Why is that? How does that happen? I'm going to show you. I'm going to explain to you. I'm going to show you some evidence. I want to talk about the true nature of our so-called free press and give you some examples of how that has been corrupted and how essential it is to a free nation. Absolutely essential, which is why it's been attacked. The true nature of who is truly running the country and the world. There are two entities running this country and the world. Fundamentally, the first is Lucifer, the prince of the power of the air, the prince of this world. And the second is the leaders whom he controls. So when all is revealed, it will show the intentions of a globalist cabal seeking to destroy the sovereignty of nations, especially America. And I'm going to do this proving that it's biblical. You're going to see that what I'm talking about is biblical. It's not an opinion. It's not conspiracy theory. It has been happening from all of history. And it happens today. And as Christians, we have to stand vigilant, looking and seeing and sensing the signs and knowing the ways of the devil and knowing his tactics and standing firm against them, being clothed with the whole armor of God. Beginning with the truth. The question then must be asked, how would they accomplish creating a global government? How would they do that? I'm going to give you some ways in which they would do that. The first is they would have to find a way to control the leaders of the individual nations, wouldn't they? If you're going to take away the sovereignty of nations, you've got to control the leaders of those nations through coercion or force, through the manipulation of elections and appointments, by predetermining the candidates of the elections and the outcome of those elections, by grooming and placing the leaders they choose through blackmail and leverage of those leaders. Second, they would have to limit or eliminate the power of the people. That's why it's so important for us to speak and to stand, Because if we surrender our power, if we surrender our rights, our God-given rights, and the power of those rights, we give them free rein to make us slaves. How are they going to do that? Well, first, by reducing our numbers. I'm just going to throw this out. How would they do that? Well, there's multiple ways. Maybe convincing families that they shouldn't have more than 1 or 2 kids. Maybe making us so poor that you can't afford kids, and both mother and father have to work full time so that the state can take over the raising of your children. Maybe there's lots of ways they could do this. They would have to limit or eliminate the power of the people by taking away their rights and their wealth. Their rights to speak freely and defend themselves. Any of this sound familiar? Their wealth. How would you limit the people? You take away their wealth. You do that through onerous monetary policy, interest rates that are unsustainable, expenses that you cannot keep up with, where you scratch out a living day to day and week to week and never get ahead. Work and work and work and never get ahead. The average age of home ownership, when I was a boy, I believe, don't quote me on the numbers, I believe the average age of first home ownership was 24. It is now 38. That's by design. That's not a coincidence. By getting them to submit to the elites, those in power. How do you do that? Well, I was thinking about that. How would you get everybody to come in line with a handful of leaders? I'll tell you how you do it. You create a common enemy. That's how you do it. So my dad used to defend police officers all the time. He came from a police family, and he was a defense attorney, and he defended police. And my dad made it very clear, and if you've served in law enforcement, you might be able to affirm this. According to my dad, and according to some officers I know, my son-in-law is an officer, the most dangerous call you can go on is what? A domestic violence call. Why? Because if you go to a call where there's just violence, neither party has any interest in the other. So you can take them and you can do with them what you want. But you walk into a home and you try to stand between a husband and wife, though they be scratching and clawing at each other. The minute you exercise authority, what do? They both turn on you. And now you're in danger. Now you're interfering in something that they don't want you to interfere in because they're in a relationship. How would you do that with a country or a nation or the globe? You come up with a common enemy. What could possibly be a common enemy? How about global warming? Wouldn't that fit the narrative? If we're killing our planet, by the way, God created the planet, and he created the people therein. I think he's capable of creating a planet that can sustain his people. But if they convince us that we're destroying our planet, now they can get us to willingly give up our rights for the sake of a common enemy, mankind. Who does that sound like? Satan himself. You are not the enemy. I am not the enemy. God created an earth for us to dwell in and to go forth and occupy and rule over. Yet they would have you believe that somehow the globe is warming because of cow farts and your vehicle. It sounds silly, doesn't it? It's exactly what they're telling us. And the world is going, oh my, we've got to stop with the cows and the cars. It's the most absurd thing you can imagine. But when you see the root of it, you see, it's one thing to argue, well, I'm Republican and I'm Democrat, so if I'm Democrat, I believe in global warming, and I'm Republican over here, and so I don't believe in global warming, and we're just going to fight about it. That gets us nowhere. But when both see that it's actually a tactic of Satan himself, the powers of darkness, to get us to turn against each other and to get us to find a common enemy, to bring us all into submission to the handful of people who tell us that it's happening and how to fix it. Isn't that interesting? What's another way of doing it? How about alien invasion? You say, well, now you're get the tinfoil hat on. Have you been watching the news lately? They're talking about releasing all kinds of information on alien invasions. How would you get all the nations of the world to come together for one purpose under one military leader? You tell them we're being invaded by aliens. And we chuckle at that. They're doing it. They're doing it. I have my own views on aliens. And if you want to pull me aside, we can talk about that. But you see what they're doing is they're creating a common enemy so that we can just kind of come up and say, who's going to protect us from an alien? Well, the global military and the global government will, because after all, they're there to protect the globe, the earth. And the earth is being attacked. You see the tactics? So clear when you see it that way. Our argument is not whether the globe is warming or not. It may be and it may not be. But let me just say this. How old do they say the earth is? Billions? Billions of years? How long have they been tracking weather? About 120 years. But we know that the trend is getting warmer. I think that sample size is a little skewed, right? So it may be getting warmer, and it also may not. But what I want you to see is they're trying to get you to believe it with fake data and false premises to get you to surrender your critical thinking to them. It's so important to understand that. Common enemy. Number 3, they would have to render impotent the documents and policies that uphold national sovereignty, like the Bible and the Constitution. They have to get rid of those because they keep us sovereign. Gee, has the Bible been under attack? Who's attacking it? The leaders are attacking it, first and foremost. Now that's changing. We're going to talk about the changes that are coming, that I believe are coming, and evidence of them. But I'm trying to get you to see that the battle is cosmic. It's not, you are not my enemy. I am not your enemy. Satan is our enemy. And all of his influence to separate us is our enemy. And he's very clever at doing it. And we see the evidence, but we never really see the evidence. And we just kind of come into line. And it's exactly what he wants. So they would have to render the documents and policies that uphold national sovereignty, like the Bible and the Constitution, completely meaningless. Through the destruction of America and her Constitution. Through the dissolution of national borders. Have you seen that in the news? How do we get rid of nations? Well, you start with the borders. That's how you get rid of nations. The blending of cultures to the destruction of any individual one. You know, they call America a melting pot. It's not a melting pot. It's not a melting pot. They send people come here, and they want to keep their own cultures. I grew up in Chicago, the Chicago area. My dad was an expert in Chicago history and knew the city front and back, every street. I don't know how you do this, but he could. And he used to bring people from out of town into town and give them tours of the city and give them historical facts about all the buildings and all the places. And he would take us through all the neighborhoods. And you would go through a neighborhood and it would be all Irish. Then you'd go under a bridge And it would be all Polish. And then you'd go under the bridge, and it'd be all Latino or whatever. And the communities stayed separate. And they kept their own cultures in those communities. If you want to come to America, inculcate your life into American culture, because if you destroy our culture, our country is at risk. We want people to come, and we want them to bring their gifts and their culture, but we don't want them to force their culture over ours, which is what's happening. All these communities across Michigan and other states where Islam is taking over the entire government of towns and counties and implementing Sharia law. And they have the permission to do it. By who? Our leaders. And why would they do that? Because it weakens the culture of America, the fabric of our nation that makes us good and great and set apart. You start to see these things in light of Satan's purposes, and you start to go, this isn't about you and me. It's so much bigger than that. They would have to sabotage our education of history and truth. Does that sound familiar? Number 4, they would have to silence those who know the truth and are willing to speak it. If you are going to destroy national identities, you have to shut the people up who know the truth. You just do. Through intimidation of pastors and churches. I am so moved in my spirit. I just want to scream out to the pastors of this country. Don't buy the lie that you can't talk about this stuff. It is essential to our freedom. It is essential to our future. And to buy the lie that somehow the pastor should never talk about this is a victory for Satan. If he shuts up God's people and God's teachers, he shuts up the truth, and the truth is what sets us free. Pastors and churches have been so intimidated. Now, there's a whole story behind that, and pastors aren't innocent in it, right? But they've been intimidated to be silent. And I say, where are the men with the shoulders? Where are the men with the chests who can stand up and belt out the truth in the face of resistance? But the terror pastors feel this morning, today, all across this country, who are afraid to walk into their congregations and speak the truth about anything that can be labeled political. And evil just keeps reigning and reigning and reigning. And I do not condemn them. I understand the pressure. I have felt it. In this small body, I've felt it. Saturdays have become miserable for me. I'm not complaining. Satan tries to get a hold of my spirit every Saturday so that I won't speak this stuff to you. Pastors have been intimidated. And I pray that the Spirit of God would take hold of their hearts and their spirits, and that out of their mouths would flow the truth of God in every area of life, so that the establishment of this great country can be rebuilt and reformed, and the truth can take hold in the minds and hearts of the people so that they don't believe the lies that are putting them into bondage and slavery every day, every single day. I could cry. I don't even know how to say this. I counsel people, right? That's one of the things I do as a main activity of mine throughout the week. And people are hurting, and people are suffering, and they're in bondage to the lies they believe. And they're in bondage to the policies and the programs that have been placed in their lives by their governments, breaking up their families, destroying their companies. I can go on and on and on. And they walk into a church. Am I on my soapbox yet? Listen, I don't condemn these pastors. I'm calling on them. I'm pleading with them. They walk into the church on Sunday morning and they get a message that makes them feel better. 3 ways to improve your life. And they walk out feeling better. And by Tuesday, they're in my office in tears, back in slavery, not being set free, because the truth is not being spoken to them. Don't you feel freedom when you realize that the battle is with Satan and not with each other? Don't you feel freedom when you realize that there's a concerted effort to destroy what we love and what God has ordained and what God has put in place by the founding of this country through the founders who loved the Lord and knew the Bible and implemented scriptural truths to form the very government under which we live? Through political correctness. You want to shut people up? Just tell them there's certain things you can't talk about. You can't say that. We're going to delete you. Or through outright censorship, something we've seen in the last 5 years. Outright censorship in America. My friends, as we go through the hot button issues of our day, you're going to find that the one common thread that runs through everything in the news and politics fall under these 4 areas I just mentioned, and have in fact been the focus of public policy for over 50 years in this country. Proven to you by the headlines reported every day in our newscasts and newspapers. Isn't it interesting that I just told you, if I were to try and come up with a plan to destroy national sovereignty and usher in a central, corrupt, powerful government, that these are the things I would do, and everything I mentioned to you, you can find in the headlines. Is that a coincidence? Every single one of them has been a topic of conversation. Do you see the common thread? It's to take your power and your individuality. Listen, you know why the elites hate Vladimir Putin? Yeah. You know, they'll tell you why. Because he's a KGB thug, right? And he's killed hundreds and thousands of people. That's what they'll tell you. I'll tell you why they hate him. I'll tell you why they linked him and President Trump. And we'll talk about President Trump. And I will give you both sides of that. Here's why they hate Putin. Because Vladimir Putin is a Russian nationalist. He wants Russia to be Russia. And he wants Russia to be sovereign. And he doesn't want it to be subject to any other governing body. And they hate him for it. And so they've convinced us that he's somehow our enemy. I'm going to say something to you, and you can believe this or not, and time will tell. I'm not prophesying. But I'm telling you, it's going to come out. I believe this. It's going to come out that President Putin, Vladimir Putin, has actually been cooperating with the people of America to bring back the sovereignty of the nations. And you will find out that he is actually not an enemy, but a friend. Now that may sound crazy to you, and I'm not condoning how he's maintained power or anything like that. I don't know what to believe about him other than what I see, which is he's a nationalist. Same is true with Xi Jinping in China. I believe with my whole heart, and I hope to give you evidence of this, that President Trump, Vladimir Putin, and Xi Jinping, and Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia and others are working together to destroy the globalists and bring back national sovereignty. And I believe you will see that. And I will offer evidence to that. So, remember I said that in order to accomplish creating a global government, they would have to find a way to control the leaders of the individual nations. And one of the ways I mentioned that they would do that is through blackmail and leverage of the leaders. Remember that? They would have to implement a system whereby they could entice the power brokers to engage in the most heinous of crimes, document their actions, and then blackmail them to control their decisions as leaders. Now, these people that they have to blackmail, these leaders, are powerful and wealthy. So the level of depravity in which they are caught must be immense to maintain control over them. Enter the Epstein files. I have to stop for today. I apologize. Or maybe you say, thank God. I don't know what your perspective is. We see it in our news as we speak with the Epstein files. What are the Epstein files really about? Jeffrey Epstein had a private island called Little St. James, an interesting name, where he would take heads of state and they would engage in things and he would film them. And if they didn't agree to it, what he would do, or they would do, I'm going to explain some of the sources behind our friend Jeffrey. They would invite leaders of state there, and if the leaders of state did not want to partake of the evil, and many did, they would drug them, put them in a room with something that looked evil, and take video and pictures of them, and then blackmail them through that. That's all coming out in the Epstein files. If you wanted to form a world government, one of the first things you would have to do is you would have to get control of the individual leaders. And the way you get control is through leverage. What you do is you catch them doing something they can't let go public. And then you say, now, do what I tell you, or I release this video. And they say, yes, sir, tell me what to do. Why would the NFL go woke? Why would they alienate so much of their customer base by introducing tranny this and trans that and all these different woke topics? Well, one is because maybe they believe it. Well, if they do, that's one discussion. Or maybe they're doing it because they're owned and controlled by someone far greater and far more powerful. Because it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no business sense. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like the most stupid business move anyone can make. These are huge companies that have been around for years and years, decades, hundreds of years. And they're making these decisions. 5 to 6% of the population agrees with their agendas of wokeness. 5 to 6%. And they're making policy decisions based on that? That's not a business decision. That's a decision made in survival. And we'll talk about why they promote these things. Because if you undermine society, you undermine that which holds us together. We will talk more about the Epstein files. We could start a petition, and you guys could sign it, and you could say, let's just do this for 5 hours, and I'd be happy to. But until then, I only have about 40 minutes. So, but it keeps you coming back, right? Keeps me coming back. I'm going to close with this. I have so much in my brain and in my heart that I want to and need to share with you. And it goes into so many different areas. Everything's connected. Do you understand? When the powers of hell are controlling the narrative, it's all connected. There's no one-offs. If you look at something that looks off to you over here and something that looks off to you over here, they're connected. And so my mind is ready to explode. 8 hours yesterday, I sat at my computer with stuff flying onto the paper, just boom, 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 boom. And then I said to Beth yesterday, I don't even have an outline. That happened at 5 o'clock this morning. I woke up, I sat down, and God gave me an outline, which He does weekly, right? Because here's why. Not because He's blessing me, it's so He can bless you. Do you understand? When I pray, I say this, God, these are your people, feed them. Get me out of the way and feed them. There's so much we need to talk about. And so much our country needs to reestablish and begin to rebuild. And I think it's happening. And we'll talk about that, so there's hope. I don't want you to leave going, well, this is hopeless. No, Satan's been at it for a long time, but he's fighting a God that you and I worship who can't be overcome. Greater is He that is in us than he that is in the world. So, with that, I'm going to ask Brother Craig to come up and lead us in prayer this morning.